Florida judges under scrutiny by the governor and the attorney general now have a reprieve. That's thanks to the State House Speaker. Our Matt Hoffman joins us live now from the state capitol tonight. Matt, one of those judges in Leon County.
Yeah, that's right. Judge Tiffany Baker Carper won't be removed from office despite the controversy around her handling of the Daniel Spencer case. You might remember that one. Well, the House Speaker said it would be up to future legislatures to decide if that judge will be impeached or, frankly, any others. This week, Florida House Speaker Daniel Perez said he wasn't interested in impeaching any judges, despite calls to do so by the governor and AG.
I'm not a big social media guy, but I'll take your word at face value. If that's something that they're calling for, future legislatures can make that decision.
And that's a decision the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is celebrating.
They both have named other judges over the past year that should be impeached. And so it's incredibly important that the decision was made by the Speaker to do this, but it is dangerous if the executive branch continues to do this.
The association says lawmakers already made it illegal to release a suspect like Daniel Spencer in the future. Governor DeSantis celebrated Missy's law, but he still called for the impeachment.
Just in terms of protecting the public, once one of these guys are convicted, you've got to pull out all the stops to protect these kids.
For criminal defense lawyers, maintaining judicial independence is critical.
Had the judge been made aware of the investigations that were ongoing, that the state attorney's office and the police were conducting, if this judge had known about that, she would not have released this person.
Finally, the attorney general has also called on the legislature to impeach a Miami-Dade state court judge who also received a reprieve. Now, according to the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission, complaints can still be made outside of that impeachment process, but in that case, punishment is up to the Florida Supreme Court, not folks here at the legislature. For now, in Tallahassee, I'm Matt Hoffman, WCTV Eyewitness News.
All right, Matt, thank you.